Welcome back to Joy Recovery Radio, where we're dedicated to helping couples find healing and hope after sexual infidelity and betrayal trauma. We share real stories, practical strategies, and deep insights to support you on both sides of this difficult journey. We truly believe this message can change lives, and you can help us reach more people by engaging with our content. Wherever you listen, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, please hit that follow or subscribe button. A quick like and a 5-star review also goes a long way, helping others discover our community when they need it most. Let's dive into today's episode.
I'm really glad you're joining me today because we're going to sit with something that shows up in almost every couple navigating sex addiction recovery and betrayal trauma. And it shows up quietly, subtly, under the surface of so many arguments and anxieties and misunderstandings. Today, we're talking about intrusive thoughts, what they actually are, what they're not, how they're different from fantasy, and why so many couples get stuck when they try to discuss them. We're also going to talk about a practice that has become pretty common among couples who are trying desperately to rebuild trust. I'm talking about daily confession of intrusive thoughts, and why, although the intention is good, the results are often painful and destructive. And here's the thing I want to say right up front. If you've been doing daily confession, if you've asked for it or agreed to it or begged for it, it does not mean you've done something wrong. It means you were scared or hurting or trying to protect yourself or trying to demonstrate commitment. It means you were doing the best you could with the information that you had. This episode is not about blame. It's about clarity and compassion and giving both partners a way forward that actually supports healing, not fear, not shame, not surveillance, but healing. So let's dive in by clearing up the number one misconception that fuels so much panic in relationships recovering from betrayal. And that's this idea that an intrusive thought is a sign of danger or relapse. That if a thought pops into someone's mind, it must mean something. And that if we track those thoughts closely enough, we could actually prevent future betrayal. The truth is, that is not how thoughts work. So let's start at the beginning, and let's lay a foundation here that will give both of you some peace. Let's talk about intrusive thoughts. Not the myth, not the fear-based version, but the actual science behind it. An intrusive thought is basically the mind glitching. Think of it like a pop-up window. It's as if your brain accidentally clicked on a tab that you did not ask for. It's involuntary, and that is the key word. It is not an act of the will. It is an automatic neurological firing that every single human being on the planet experiences every day. That includes people in recovery. That includes betrayed partners. That includes therapists. That includes clergy. That includes politicians, teachers, plumbers, anyone and everyone, including people who have never struggled a day in their life with sexual integrity. Intrusive thoughts are not moral actions. They're not intentional actions. They're not choices. They don't reflect your desires, and they're not a sign of relapse. They're just thoughts. Random, often weird, uninvited, many times meaningless. Now, I want to pause here because this is usually where one of two reactions happen. If you're the betrayed partner listening, you might be thinking, okay, maybe they're involuntary, but they still scare me, and they still hurt, and they still feel like danger. And if you're the addict in recovery, you might be thinking, okay, so I'm not crazy. I'm not a monster. I'm not broken because my brain does this. Both of your reactions make sense. Both are human reactions. And we're going to talk to both of you today. here's the foundation we're going to build from. Intrusive thoughts happen to you. They're not produced by you. They are not indicators of what you want. They are indicators of what your brain is trying to avoid or what your nervous system is anxious about. And sometimes they don't indicate anything at all. So why do they get treated like emergencies in couples recovering from betrayal? Two main reasons. Number one, trauma makes everything feel dangerous until safety is rebuilt. And number two, shame makes every unwanted thought feel like a failure. And you put those two forces together, that is a recipe for confusion and overreaction and fear and misinterpretation. So I want to talk about why demanding confession of intrusive thoughts, even though it feels like it should build safety, it actually erodes safety. It destroys psychological stability for the addict, and it damages intimacy in the relationship. There are three entities represented here: the betrayed partner, the addict, and the coupleship between the two. All three are harmed by this process. When you understand that, everything else starts to make sense. But before we get there, I want to go straight into the segment that so many of you have asked for, the question that couples get stuck on, and the source of the most confusion. It's this question: how do we tell the difference between an intrusive thought and a fantasy? And when does an intrusive thought turn into a fantasy? This is where clarity matters so much, because betrayed partners often fear that every intrusive thought is actually a fantasy in disguise. And recovering addicts often feel terrified that if they admit to any intrusive thought, it's going to be treated like a full-blown act of willful engagement. So let's talk about the difference in a way that is compassionate, grounded in science, and totally practical. We need to talk about three things. Number one, what an intrusive thought feels like internally. Two, what fantasies feel like internally. And three, where's the turning point? The moment when involuntary becomes voluntary. Let's start with intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts feel like a mental interruption. It's a pop-up. It's a disturbance. It's something that shows up and it's uninvited, and it usually disappears just as quickly as it showed up. The emotional reaction to a normal intrusive thought is usually, well, that was weird, or where did that come from? Or, no thank you. There's no leaning in, there's no feeding it, there's no building it out, there's no staying with it or dwelling on it on purpose. An intrusive thought is the equivalent of someone walking past your table at a restaurant, and you catch a glimpse of something in your peripheral vision, but you don't look at it. You didn't ask for that visual. You didn't focus on it. You didn't chase it. You didn't observe it. You didn't follow it. It just walked by. Your eyes noticed it because eyes notice any movement. Your brain notices it because brain notices any stimuli. But that's not intent. That is not choice. That's not fantasy. Fantasy is completely different. Fantasy is not about what appears. It's about how you respond to what appears. Fantasy has a feeling of moving towards the thought. You focus on it. You dwell on it. You relish it. You stay with it. You begin to add details and build to the thought. You expand the scenario. You use the thought for stimulation or escape. Fantasy is chosen. It involves an act of the will. It requires your participation. Fantasy is not what happens to you. Fantasy is what you do with the thought. And this is where couples often can get relief, because the content of the thought doesn't matter nearly as much as the direction of the mind. Intrusive thought, your mind pulls away. Fantasy, your mind leans in. Intrusive thought, it shows up. Fantasy, you build it. Intrusive thought, it passes. Fantasy, you return to it over and over again. Two completely different processes in the mind. Even if the images or themes look similar on the surface. So when does an intrusive thought turn into a fantasy? That is the golden question. And here's the answer, stated as simply and gently as I possibly can. An intrusive thought becomes fantasy the moment you begin engaging it. The moment you choose to stay instead of let it pass. The moment you begin adding details. The moment you return to it with intention. The moment you use it for stimulation or escape. That is the shift from involuntary to voluntary. And I want to emphasize this because couples miss this all the time. It is not the presence of the thought that defines fantasy. It is the participation. Was the will engaged? It is the choosing part of our mind. That is the difference. An intrusive thought can be sexual. A fantasy can be sexual. The content is not the defining feature. The intention is. And this matters deeply, not just psychologically, but relationally. Because it helps the betrayed partner understand that intrusive thoughts don't indicate desire or loyalty or intention. And it helps the partner in recovery to understand that they are not doomed or broken or failing every time their brain fires old wiring. This distinction is one of the most compassionate things that you can offer your coupleship. And now that we've laid that foundation, we can talk about why asking someone to confess intrusive thoughts that are not even chosen, ends up harming both partners and the relationship. This is where couples get caught in a cycle that can feel like honesty, but it ends up feeding fear and shame, and it does not promote healing for either person or the relationship. I want to be gentle with this because most couples who end up in confession of intrusive thoughts did not get there because anyone wanted control or punishment or chaos. You arrived there because the betrayed partner was scared and she's just trying to feel safe. And the addict was ashamed and he's just trying to prove commitment. So both intentions are good. It's the impact, though, that is especially painful and destructive. So let's talk about the emotional, neurological, and relational consequences of trying to police our thoughts. Let's start with the betrayed partner. If that's you, I want to say something straight from my heart to your heart. Your fear makes sense. Your hypervigilance makes sense. Your need for information, it makes sense. You were blindsided. You were betrayed. Your body learned that danger can show up quietly, unexpectedly, devastatingly at any minute. So, of course, your nervous system wants all the data it can get. It's trying to protect you. Here's the tragedy. Daily confession of intrusive thoughts does not soothe trauma. It activates it. It keeps you in that constant state of scanning, monitoring, analyzing, and questioning. Is he having a thought right now? Has he had a thought yet today? What if he's hiding some of them? Does this mean that he still wants to be with someone else? Does this mean that he's not safe? Does this mean that I'm not enough for him? Does this mean relapse is just around the corner? Every confession becomes a trigger for you. And it's not because he did something wrong. It's because your body cannot metabolize the information. Your nervous system can't distinguish between a thought that he had that popped in involuntarily and a behavior that he chose intentionally. To a traumatized brain, both feel like danger. So instead of daily confession building safety for you, it actually builds hypervigilance. It traps you in a loop of checking, questioning, analyzing, anticipating. The tragic part is this: your nervous system never gets to rest. You never get to rebuild your internal sense of safety. The trauma wound keeps getting poked every 24 hours. This is not your fault. This is your biology doing its best to keep you safe and alive. But this practice does not heal. It is re-traumatizing you. Now, let's talk to the recovering addict. If that's you, I want to speak from my heart to your heart for a moment. You have probably spent years, or if you're like me, decades, feeling like your thoughts are dangerous. Your desires are dangerous. Your brain is your enemy. And you have to hide or monitor or suppress everything about your inner world. A daily confession of intrusive thoughts might have felt like a way to prove that you're serious about your recovery, a way to show your accountability and your integrity and that you're not hiding anything anymore. But here's the truth. Daily confession of involuntary thoughts destroys your internal psychological stability. Here's what it does. It trains your brain to obsessively self-monitor. Did I just have a thought? Is that one I need to confess? Was that an intrusive thought or was that a fantasy? What if I miss one today? What if she gets hurt again? What if I say too little about it? What if I say too much about it? What if she gets upset? What if I disappoint her? What if I ruin both of our days? Suddenly your recovery becomes about policing your own mind instead of transforming your life. You're no longer growing integrity. You're trying to avoid punishment. You're no longer building honesty. You're building fear-based shame compliance. You're no longer learning to regulate your emotions. You're learning to scan your mind for danger. And here's the irony. The more you try not to have certain thoughts, the more your brain generates them. That's neuroscience. Daily confession turns your mind into a pressure cooker. It goes from thought suppression to more intrusive thoughts, to more confession, to more shame, to more intrusive thoughts, and the cycle never stops. Your recovery shifts from healing to obsessing about your thoughts, from growth to self-surveillance, from your own agency to a psychological collapse. And that is devastating to your long-term sobriety.
At joy-recovery.com, we offer personalized recovery coaching to help you move from pain to purpose. We also provide supportive groups where you can connect with others who truly understand. So, whether you're battling addiction, healing from betrayal, or rebuilding a brand new relationship, you're not alone. We can help. Go to joy-recovery.com today.
Let's look at the third entity, the impact on the relationship as a whole, because this is where the emotional erosion happens. Daily confession creates what Dr. Manwala calls a power imbalance. One partner now becomes the monitor, and the other becomes the one being monitored. It shifts the relationship into a parent-child dynamic, where the betrayed partner becomes the authority figure, and the addict becomes the compliant rule follower. It creates compliance instead of connection, fear instead of trust, policing instead of intimacy. Even worse, it teaches the couple that, quote, honesty means tell me everything that happens in your brain every day, instead of tell me the things that you choose that actually have an impact on our relationship. So it blurs categories. Thoughts now become events, and events become threats, and threats become triggers, and triggers become proof that recovery must not be happening. And the bond between you starts to fray because you're not living in the present together anymore. You're living in the fear of the internal world of one partner. No relationship can thrive like that. Not because anyone is bad, not because anyone is weak, but because this structure, this system of interaction is incompatible with rebuilding safety, trust, or intimacy. Here's the part most couples never hear. There is a healthier way. It is a way that honors both partners. It's a way that actually rebuilds safety. It's a path that creates real intimacy. It's a way that supports long-term recovery for both of you. And it starts with this basic understanding. We do not build safety for each other by policing thoughts. We build safety by understanding thoughts and by creating boundaries around behaviors, not thoughts. We need to understand something foundational. This is the part that surprises couples the most. A lot of people assume intrusive thoughts happen because something is wrong, or because he must be secretly fantasizing, or because they're about to act out. But what we know from trauma research, addiction science, and cognitive psychology is that intrusive thoughts become more frequent in situations where there are three things: pressure, fear, and surveillance. Not because the person is unsafe, but because their environment is now unsafe. In other words, intrusive thoughts are an actual response to stress. They are not a sign of relapse. Let's break that down, because this awareness can shift everything in your relationship. Here's the deal. Your brain has something like a threat detection system. It's constantly scanning for danger. And not just physical danger, emotional danger, relational danger, moral danger, social danger. And when you fear punishment, or you fear disappointing someone, or you fear losing someone, or triggering your partner, or messing up, your brain goes on high alert. And a brain on high alert tends to fire off more intrusive thoughts because that's what the brain thinks is protecting you. It's trying to anticipate danger so you can avoid it. So if someone in recovery believes, if I have an intrusive thought, I'm in danger, that belief will actually produce more intrusive thoughts. And it's not because they're secretly acting out. It's not because they're fantasizing. It's not because they want to betray you. It's because their brain is scanning for the very thing that they fear. And then if you add the belief, if I have a thought today, I have to confess it. Now the thought moves from being meaningless to meaningful, to being a risk. And so now it is monitored, it is emotionally charged, and the stakes are high, and the brain treats it like a threat. So the thought that used to drift in and out and meant nothing now becomes something like, oh no, it's happening again. I'm going to have to tell her about it. She's going to think that I don't love her. She's going to panic. She's going to think I'm unsafe. And that emotional activation magnifies the thought. Suddenly what used to be a 1-second mental blip becomes a 30-second spike, and then a 2-minute spiral, and a 20-minute wave of shame, and then a compulsion to go and confess it. And that confession interacts with the partner's trauma, which interacts with his shame, which leads to more intrusive thoughts, which leads to more obsession and confession. And now you're trapped in what's called a trauma OCD feedback loop. This is not healing anyone. This is not accountability. This is not safety. This is neurological chaos. And both partners think that they're doing something wrong, when in reality, it's the system. It's the interaction that's wrong. There's a famous experiment in psychology called the white bear study. The rule is simple. Whatever you do, don't you think about a white bear. Guess what happens? Everyone's brain is immediately flooded with white bears. This is called, in psychology, a thought rebound. It happens because the brain doesn't understand the word don't. If you try to avoid a thought, your brain has to think about it in order to track. whether you're successfully avoiding it. So the more someone thinks, whatever you do, don't have a sexual thought. Don't think about that person over there. Don't have an intrusive thought today. Don't trigger your partner. Don't have anything to confess to her today. The more you think that, the more the brain generates the very thoughts that you're trying to avoid. This is so important for both of you to understand. The presence of intrusive thoughts does not indicate a risk of relapse. But stress, fear, and shame, those do correlate with a risk for relapse. And finally, now that the neuroscience is on the table, we can talk about what healthy accountability looks like. Accountability is essential. Transparency is essential. Boundaries are essential, but they have to be done in a way that supports healing, not fear. So what does healthy accountability actually look like? Healthy accountability is not about reporting every passing mental event. Healthy accountability is about reporting three things: behaviors, choices, and patterns. That means we men, we need to have honesty around the actual actions that we took. Any intentional engagement in fantasy, any risky or compromising situations, any boundary violations, any emotional or relational vulnerabilities, anything that impacts safety, but not involuntary thoughts that were not an act of your will. Let me say that again. Healthy accountability deals with voluntary choices, not involuntary thoughts. Intrusive thoughts are not reported because they're meaningless. But fantasy, because it is chosen, is absolutely something that you must bring up in your structured check-ins or with your therapist or your recovery group. You're not hiding anything by not reporting intrusive thoughts, but you are holding secrets if you've been engaging in fantasy and you don't disclose it. So let's talk to the betrayed partner for a moment, because your safety matters deeply. Healthy safety means rebuilding a sense of internal security, not outsourcing your safety to your partner's thought life. I genuinely hope you hear this. You do not need access to your partner's mind in order to be safe. Your safety comes from your boundaries, your ability to enforce those boundaries, your own internal cues, your nervous system healing, your partner's behaviors, the way they respond to your pain, the consistency of their actions, the transparency of their lifestyle, the stability of their recovery program, but not the content of their thoughts. You're not safer because you know every thought. You are safer when they tell the truth about their choices, when they take responsibility for their actions, when they do their recovery work consistently, when they show you empathy and accountability, when they respond to your triggers with care, and when they demonstrate real behavioral change. That's where your safety grows. And I want to add something very important here. Knowing every intrusive thought actually will undermine your own safety, because your body, and more specifically, your nervous system, cannot distinguish between, oh, he had an involuntary pop-up thought, or he intentionally fantasized about someone else. To your nervous system, it's all danger. So witnessing intrusive thoughts does not soothe your trauma, it feeds it. You deserve better than that. You deserve a path that supports your healing, not one that keeps your trauma wound open every day. Let's talk about the coupleship, the relationship as a whole, because healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens inside a structure that holds both of you and your relationship with care. Here's what healthy, healing relational structures look like. Number one, some kind of consistent honesty check-in. It's a set time every day or every week. It's not spontaneous, and it's not driven by a crisis or shame or fear. And in these healthy honesty check-ins, the recovering addict shares any fantasy, any boundary violations, any behaviors, any slips, any concerns, any vulnerabilities. And as the betrayed partner, you can choose whether you would like to share how you felt that week, what triggered you, what you need more of or less of from your partner, what brought you relief that week, where do you feel fear, and where do you feel progress. This becomes an emotionally consistent, safe structure, a ritual that the two of you can make as part of the rhythm of your life. There needs to be boundaries around secrecy and lying. This is crucial. Boundaries need to be strict, that there should be no lying by omission, no manipulation, no secretive behavior, no acting out, no hiding patterns in any way, and no lying about events or choices. But boundaries are not about thoughts. This is how trust is rebuilt, through honesty about actions, not thoughts. So let's talk for a moment about what to do now that hopefully you have some clarity. If you're the betrayed partner, you get to breathe. You get to release the responsibility of trying to police and interpret someone else's brain. You get to set boundaries around actions, not thoughts. You get to build safety inside your own body again, and you get to let your nervous system rest. Your safety is sacred. You deserve a path that truly supports healing, not one that keeps your trauma activated. For the recovering addict, you get to breathe as well. You get to be human. You get to build integrity from the inside out. You get to stop fearing your own mind or obsessing about unwanted thoughts. You get to stop performing. You get to stop collapsing under shame. Your recovery is not about intrusive thoughts. Your recovery is about wise choices, daily boundaries, emotional honesty, and a grounded support system. And if you're listening together as a couple, this is important. The two of you can absolutely build something that is stable, something that is safe and intimate and honest and truly connected. There are two paths. One is harmful, the other is healing. Let's choose the path of healing.
That wraps up another episode of Joy Recovery Radio. We hope our conversation today brought you clarity, comfort, or a new perspective on your journey. Remember, healing is possible, and you don't have to walk this path alone. To learn more about how we can support you, visit us at joy-recovery.com. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, choose joy.